Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to highlight our bounce back candidates for the 2026 minor league season. And we're going to focus a little bit on the majors by discussing the Orioles bullpen, what they've improved over the offseason, where there may still be some holes, and some players that are in the organization now that we think could make an impact. But first, as we like to do at the top of every episode, we want to shout out some new members of our Patreon community, and for that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, we got 4 more, once again, new patrons this week, and a couple famous patrons, I guess you could say, that I semi-peer pressured into by accident to signing up on the Discord. Those would be Connor Newcomb of Locked On Orioles. I tried to give him free access to the patron channel since he's been a guest on our show like 15 times or more, and he said, no, I will pay you. So we'll take it. Thank you, Connor. Everybody check out Locked On Orioles, and also check out Bird's Eye View on another Orioles podcast. Scott Magnus signed up for a year as well, so appreciate that, Scott. We also have Zachary Appleby and Donna Brown, who signed up at the single A level. So appreciate you guys. As we enter the top 30, almost top 25 of our top 50 countdown, it's a good time to sign up.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a reminder, now is a great time to sign up because we are in the midst of our top 50 prospects countdown. You can access not just the top 25 or so players remaining, but also all the episodes we've done up to this point. And then once we get into the season, have bonus weekly coverage from the three of us, monthly updates to the top 50, and a whole lot more. So be sure to check that out over at patreon.com. Now, this is an episode that we do every year, which is where we highlight players in the Orioles farm system that we think are good candidates to bounce back this coming season. And they could be bouncing back from a bad performance the year before. They could be bouncing back from a promotion that happened mid-season that didn't go very well, which is the case with at least one player we're going to talk about tonight. Or they could be returning from an injury that cost them most or all of last season, and we're looking for big things from them as they recover this year. And we put together a pretty interesting list of prospects. We each chose one hitter and one pitcher that we think are worthy bounce back candidates. And I'm going to start with Nick here because I want to focus on his hitter first, although both of the players he chose have been guys we've discussed a lot in the last couple of years. His hitter has gotten a lot of discussion this offseason.
Yeah, let's start with the big man. I know there's still some strong believers in this guy out there outside of our community. So those who follow the Orioles system, which is good to see, and I'm sure there are some who were highly intrigued by him at some point and maybe have jumped ship, which is understandable given his statistical track record up to this point. But it's Thomas Sosa. We're gonna do it again. We're gonna do it another year. But I think it's justified to stay on this train and keep having him as a guy we're excited about going into the year. Just because, we've known for years the raw power is elite. We know the outfield arm is very strong. No question, the defense is raw, and there's a long way to go defensively outside of that arm. It's a major league right field arm, but I think with Sosa, the priority is the bat. Focus on the defense later. I'll worry about that at the end of the season if the bat comes around. We need to see the bat get to where it can be. And I still think there are some reasons to be optimistic for Sosa going into 2026, even though maybe the stat line doesn't look all that great up to this point in his career. He only turned 21 2 weeks ago. So he's getting ready for his first full year at AA, got that promotion at the end of the year, and will be around 3 years younger than the average Eastern League player next year. So, and last year he played in just 47 high A games. That included less than a week before he got hurt with the knee injury. Still, the Orioles promoted him to AA for the final 2 weeks of that season, where I think he did homer. I don't know if it was his first game. I don't know if it was his first at bat or not. I can't remember off the top of my head, but first game he homers, get you a little bit excited after that promotion. Orioles sent him to the Arizona Fall League to get more at bats because he missed so much time. And he was one of the youngest players in the league, but they gave him no playing time. It's just never got back-to-back starts, I don't believe. I think he had 45 total at bats with 3 here, 3 there. Just felt like we didn't learn anything from his AFL stint. Hopefully any learning he did get was in the cages or in the dugout, being around older players and more advanced prospects. because he got like zero opportunity on the field, which kind of sucked. And I don't know if that was just because he was young and the outfield situation was crowded on that team. I know Ethan Anderson, not catching and DHing a lot. Maybe that took a lineup spot, or maybe there was, a knee thing and they didn't want to push him too much, but just get a couple more at bats. I don't know, but he only stole 4 bases last year after stealing 30 the year before. I think that was clearly a like don't run on that knee this year. We'll get back to that next year. But you look at some of the numbers where he signs of where he did improve. He struck out 29% of the time in 2024. And in his nearly 200 high A plate appearances this year, that dropped to 24% while he kept a walk rate around 10%. So pretty solid there, at least improvements. We started to see the raw power turn into game power for the first time. He still popped 9 home runs last year. Contact rates were trending up in high A and double A, got up to 75%, which is better and better. Small samples, but still, like I just think there were a lot of signs of real progress in that limited playing time. And the biggest sign was that the Orioles still promoted him to double A. Last offseason, we know he revamped his body. I think he's 30, 40 pounds heavier than his listed weight now. So maybe all that development, the body pushed back a little bit this year. But now he's got the body right. The raw tools are starting to translate to the field and in games. Fresh new season, got that taste of double A to close up the year, and he knows what to expect now. And so let's see him take off this year, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic of a breakout as well, and mostly just because he's just turned 21 years old. The organization is clearly high on him, the way they push him. I think the study might have been Oyster Athletics or whatever. I can't remember the exact one of these analytically inclined prospect sites or web pages that talked about how age to level and being promoted is almost more important than the results on the field sometimes for these young prospects. And you saw that with Thomas Sosa clearly, and they sent him to the AFL. Yeah, didn't get a bunch of playing time, but had a great max exit velocity, average exit velocity. So just more proof that he hits the ball extremely hard for his young age. And yeah, I think he's just flashed all over the place, showing you what he can do. I just talked about Reed Trimble on a podcast recently on the top 50 countdown, and kind of similar with Thomas Sosa, just stay healthy and get some consistent playing time. And I think he can really start to build on this, as he's like the same age as Aaron Estrada. And they'll both be potentially in double A to start this season. So he's got a chance to make up some ground and still make the majors at like 23 years old if development goes well from here.
Yeah, the health is really going to be the key thing, and I wish that we had seen him more in the AFL, because I think that would have answered some questions that we might have had left over from the end of the season, because he was not back from an injury long before he got promoted to double A. And I actually thought, all things considered, that his time in double A went fairly well. Yeah, there's a lot of areas where he can get better, but when you consider how young he is and that he had the injuries early in the season as he did, I thought his performance overall was fine. There's some clear areas where he needs to get better. Nick touched on one of them, and that's the defense. He's got the arm of a major league right fielder. There's no doubt about that right now. And I think it's possible that he maybe settles into that Anthony Santander range, where maybe the defense isn't always exactly what you want it to be, but it's just enough. And when you pair it with that arm, you're fine with him as your everyday right fielder. The thing is going to be just making sure that he makes enough contact next year in double A to get into that power, because when you see him unleash that power, it is really impressive. And we talk all the time about the loud tools that he has, and the power is certainly one of them. He just needs to be in a place where he's healthy and making contact consistently enough to get into that.
I kind of do like that Santander comp there. Of course, that is like 100th percentile outcome, of course, but yeah, I like that. I'll move to the pitcher now, and it's Zach Fruit. I just recently did the top 50 episode on Fruit over on Patreon, and he's inside the top 40 for us without spoiling an exact spot for anyone not checking those out yet. But like when going back through my notes and just thoughts on Fruit, putting everything together for that episode, like I talked myself into believing a bounce back is possible here. The caveat being we don't know what the health situation is with Fruit right now. He had the lat injury last year. That zapped him. It happened very early in the year, and I don't think he was ever fully right after that. And then we never got word why he was removed from the Arizona Fall League roster. But as I said in the top 50 episode, like until we hear otherwise, I'm just going to assume that it was fatigue or soreness, and he wanted to go to the AFL. The team wanted him to go, but maybe just didn't feel quite right. And it was like a cautious approach. Go home, get right physically, start fresh, healthy in 2026. I'm going to assume that that's what happened there, but he's 25. He turns 26 in April. He was drafted as a fifth-year senior, used that extra COVID year. Orioles brought him in there with pretty big plans and immediately turned him from a two-pitch pitcher to like a 5-6 pitch pitcher. Gave him a full starter's repertoire. He's an incredibly fast learner with some of the better raw stuff in the system. I think as Baseball America, he's typically on that, top stuff plus numbers according to their model each year by age. But I don't know. I'm guessing the Orioles keep him on a starter's track to begin the year. I wouldn't hate it, though, if they just said, you're in the bullpen now, and let's get rocking from the start in the bullpen role. Start in AA like a month or so, and then spend most of the rest of the year in AAA and see if you really have something here with him, because he is Rule 5 eligible at the end of the season. So I think he's the kind of arm where you can comfortably fall back on that relief role, though, and make that switch later in the year if you need to. But I go back to the spring training, and I had forgot until I was preparing for that episode. I forgot that we saw him in spring training last year, and he had two really good appearances. Granted, spring training, it's late in games. It's other minor leaguers typically in there, but Fruit actually faced a lot of Boston's major leaguers in that one game. Still a spring training game nonetheless, but I don't. He's also probably jacked up because he knows he's getting 1-2 shots to pitch in front of the big league staff, and he sat 97, 98 with 17 inches of induced vertical break and 7 feet of extension. He was 95.5, I think, with the sinker. Like, the crazy velo was there. He's got the wide arsenal. It was the command and staying in the zone that needs work. Like, he did struggle to find the strike zone in that outing, and walks have been an issue for him going back to his college days. But the idea of Zach Fruit coming in and pumping 98 plus in one inning stints is pretty exciting. And like, he had stuff wise Mason Miller comps coming into the draft. And after the Orioles drafted him, and John Mioli talked about essentially they were giving him Kyle Bradish's repertoire. So like that's just stuff comps, not like, I'm not claiming Fruit's going to be the next great closer in Major League Baseball or sitting a number 3 in this rotation behind Bradish and whoever else, but it speaks to the stuff that he has. And so hopefully he's healthy entering spring, and we'll see how the Orioles decide to deploy him here.
Another great choice. I think there's plenty of, surprisingly, just after all the pitching we've talked about, I think there's plenty of room for him to start the year back in AA Chesapeake's rotation. That seems to be like a little bit of a dead zone between the cramming in AAA, the upper end of the AA rotation, and then in single A, it's really, really crowded. But there is room for him, I think, to start the year in the first half, at least, to give him another shot to start. And if it doesn't work out, just a super easy switch to relief prospect, let him eat. And yeah, maybe he can sit 98, 99 miles per hour out of a bullpen. I like him if he's healthy. I feel like we've seen enough to know that last year was an aberration. I just think maybe the command will never be that good, but the stuff was too good to not strike out that many guys and get hit around that much. So I think whether it is as a relief prospect or not, I think the stuff is there to play, and I think the team knows that too. I like Zach Fruit a lot.
Yeah, I don't think we ever really saw anything close to a fully healthy, effective Zach Fruit last year, because after only 3 appearances, he went on the IL. He comes back, and when he got back to Chesapeake after a couple of rehab outings in Aberdeen, what we saw were a lot of peaks and valleys in his performance. And what I focus on in particular is the strikeouts and the walks. Because if you go through his game logs, I have it right here. July 30th, outing against New Hampshire, 3 2/3 innings, he gives up 5 runs, 4 of them earned, but he strikes out 6 and only walks 1. But then in his next few outings, 4 strikeouts, 3 walks the following week against Akron. And then against Erie the following week, 8 walks, 2 strikeouts, and just 3 1/3 innings. Then he settles down after that for back-to-back appearances, 4 strikeouts to 1 walk over 4 1/3, 7 strikeouts to 2 walks and 5 in the third, in what was one of his best outings of the season on August 27th against Reading. Then the next outing, 6 walks to 5 strikeouts. And it's why I was hoping we'd see him in the fall league, because what I really wanted to see out there is, I don't care if he puts up a 7 ERA. Let's just see him consistently keep the walks down, because that was really the issue that he had last year. His stuff, as you both touched on, is big league quality when it is on. Whether or not you think it's good enough for a rotation really comes down to how well you think he can command that whole repertoire. But his fastball is a big league quality fastball. Last year, we just didn't see anything close to a fully healthy, effective Zach Fruit. And if we can get that this year, regardless of what role it is, he's going to bounce back. I do agree with Nick that I think it might just be best, given his age, to turn him loose in the bullpen and just figure, all right, he's a 1 to 2 inning guy that has a really deep repertoire. That's not a bad thing at all. But I don't know how realistic it is to stretch him out as a starter. I expect the Orioles to do that, and I can understand the logic in doing that, but it may make sense to just turn him loose in the bullpen at this point.
Keith Law predicted this. He said he didn't like Zach Fruit because he was just going to get hurt, and look what happened. He immediately got hurt. Keith Law, always right, once again.
Can always count on Keith Law to trust his first viewing of a player in person and never change.
Be careful, Nick. You don't want your DMs getting blown up again.
I blocked him. He can't DM. Well, I think you can still like DM people. I don't think blocking on Twitter does anything anymore, but yeah.
Speaking of other things that aren't good at what they're supposed to be at. All right, I'll go over to mine now. I'll start with my pitcher since we're on that track. I'm going to go with Chase McDermott as my bounce back candidate. Clearly just a lost year for Chase in 2025. Whether it was a starter, getting hurt, coming back, transitioning to relief, showing that he can do that and having some success out of the Norfolk bullpen, but then getting a shot with the Orioles later in the season didn't go particularly well. And then I think he missed some time with having a baby, not him, but his wife. I think there were some things outside of baseball that were potentially affecting him at the end of the season as well. So Zach, to mention again, top 50 countdown episode, mentioned an article that he had discovered. And Zach, I'd like to have you talk more about it, but basically it seems like he's figured some things out. He's got his velocity up a lot compared to what it usually is around this time of year. But yeah, I think just with a full offseason of knowing his role as a reliever, focusing on those short stints and getting that velocity up, the stuff sharper, I think we all know that he's got the stuff kind of similar to Zach Fruit to be a weapon out of the bullpen.
Yeah, I was doing the McDermott episode in our Patreon countdown. I'm trying to pull up the name of the website that had the story now, but it was an interview with McDermott that was done in December where he talked about some of the things that he's been working on this offseason, and he touched on some of the struggles he was having last year. His wife had a baby. It was not stated in this article why he went on the bereavement list in September at the end of the major league season, but regardless, the reason I would bring that up is that if you look at the 2 outings he had in September for the Orioles, one of them was the day before he went on the bereavement list. The other one was only, I think, 3 or 4 days before. So given just the human element of that, I think you got to write that off. But in this article, McDermott talked about how he's been working to adjust his delivery this offseason, basically trying to focus on some simple things like making sure he doesn't fly through too early in his delivery. And he noted in this article that compared to where he was last offseason, his fastball velocity is up a few ticks. So if you want to look for an encouraging sign, he was throwing about 92 in December of 2024 going into the 2025 season. From this article, it sounded like he was up to 95 this offseason. So being able to focus on the simple things, get the fastball velocity up, that's really been what he's trying to do this offseason. And we're not going to know until he gets on the field whether or not it's working for him. But that was very encouraging. And then the other thing, too, is that I think we got confirmation last year that he is a reliever. And I was, I was all for keeping him as a starter for as long as the Orioles could, but I think last year showed us that he's going to end up in the bullpen. And before the promotion to the major leagues, if you look at him from August to early September in Norfolk, he was really, really good out of the bullpen for them. So it's why I said last week that I think he's going to graduate this year, not just because he'll get enough random innings, but I think that if he can get some runway in Norfolk to continue to work on the things that he's doing this offseason and improve, he could actually get into the major league bullpen and stick, because the stuff when it is on is good enough. And that's always been the case throughout his career. And if he can just throw it for strikes consistently enough, I think he'll be very effective.
And it's his final option year, too. So I think the Orioles are going to give him every chance to establish himself, at least in spurts between going up and down this year in the bullpen.
Yeah, I love the article just because it's the rare, like, off the beaten path find that actually had a lot of helpful information in it. And it was, yeah, like the velo you mentioned being up a couple of ticks already from where he was last December, and how he talked about how effortless it is. And so he's like, I think I can get to 100, and not like, oh, I'm throwing 98 now, I'm going to get to 100 now, blah, blah, blah. But it was just like how effortless it is to go from 92 to 95 already at this point, and he's not even fully ramped up. And obviously understanding that 100 isn't a goal, but I think that's a testament to how he feels. Yeah, some of this is greatest shape of my life talk for sure. But at the same time, there was, he talked about how he's working out of a facility, recording everything, and then also sending it to another coach. And it's where some of those things you guys touched on is where he said there are some things in his delivery that are being pointed out that no one had ever like told him about. And that's not a shot at the Orioles pitching coaches at all. Like, that's just, it's a benefit of offseason and one-on-one individualized instruction that he's getting. And it's these small little things that he's talked about are hopefully add up. And like, I go back to last year when he was in Norfolk and so well, it was the game I always played every Chase McDermott outing. I could look at the box score line and I would guess what percentage of his fastballs were in the strike zone. And I could almost get it to the T every single time, because when he was in the zone with that fastball, he was dominant in Norfolk. And when he wasn't, the box score reflected it. It was like a direct correlation all year long for him. So yeah, I don't know. I think the family issues, and I also appreciated he was pretty open about, like, he was a psychology major in college, and he understood that there were some things off the field, like behind the scenes with the mental health side, that he was struggling with. And so like, I respect the hell out of that. It's life sucks sometimes. It's not fair a lot of times. And given the life events, which are the most important, they come first before baseball. These are human beings before they're baseball players. And so if he experienced some sort of loss or family issue, and then he's what, turns 27 this year or 28 this year. He's getting older. Like Bob mentioned, he's got one more shot. He's got one more option year left. This could be his final shot with the Orioles. He can't stay healthy. Things aren't going well for him in the big leagues. He's struggling to find that home in the big league. So I think it was just a disaster. And so, yeah, I'm excited to give him another shot here. But at the same time, realizing that, look, he is getting older and this is his final shot. And he is going to have to show a lot pretty quickly if he's going to make it. But positive signs so far entering the year, at least.
Yeah, there's no question.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bob. Yeah, I just want to say real quick that the article that we reference here is on Reporting Baseball in Indiana, a website that you should go check out. Really good piece here on McDermott that was published on December 17th.
Nice. Yeah, and I'll transition now to my other pick, which is basically the position player version of Chase McDermott, which would be Judd Fabian, who he showed flashes of what he could become in the first half of 2025, got hurt, came back, was a total disaster in the second half. Overall, in AAA, he had 431 plate appearances and had an 86 WRC plus, batting 183. But the numbers say that it was a tale of two halves, because in the first half, up until June 20th, he had a 113 WRC plus, batted 224, 794 OPS, 15.3% walk rate, 27.7% strikeout rate, which for Judd Fabian, that's pretty darn good. ISO of 229, So all these things, he's hitting for power, he's walking, he's striking out less in that repeat year at AAA, which we like to see. Gets hurt, I believe it was his wrist, comes back and is just not the same player whatsoever. Bats 135 with the 534 OPS, 63 WRC plus. Walks go up to 20%, strikeout rate goes up just over 35%. ISO is under 100 at 081. So to me, that says he's playing through a wrist injury. He was swinging less, much less, walking more, striking out more, no power. I'm kind of writing off the second half. You can't, because he's like 25 now and kind of on the precipice of put up or shut up time to make it to the majors and stick. But I think the Orioles kind of used that second half as a reason not to put him on the 40-man roster. I think it was a smart move. Obviously, didn't get selected in the Rule 5 draft, but I still think if he can recover from that wrist injury and get back to what he was doing in the first half of 2025, that I think he could be a very useful up and down reserve outfielder in 2026.
Yeah. I was digging more into Judd Fabian because I was almost pretty much at the point of like I'm kind of out all the way. But then I think it was when Bob, I think you did the Judd Fabian top 50 episode, and you highlighted that I'm the high man on our rankings on Judd Fabian, even though I'm probably the lowest of the 30 lowest on Fabian, actually. But so I was digging in some more, and actually to add even some more numbers to that and the wrist injury episode, plus also the paternity leave stint he had earlier in the year. And if you look at, I was playing around with TJ Nesteco's tools over there in some of his StatCast data with Fabian earlier. And I looked at, this is just quick and dirty research like earlier today. This isn't like granular, like fully fleshed out here, but I just looked at his rolling strikeout percentage, end zone contact, and weighted on base average. And the strikeout rate was actually really, really good for a stretch there. You mentioned the first half of the season. Actually, there was like for Judd Fabian, it was beautiful. Then around paternity leave time, you saw a spike. And then that declined into that range of when he got hurt. And then it's just a spike. It is just up, 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 up. We're on most people who listen to this aren't watching on YouTube. They're listening to the podcast. So I wasn't going to pull it up or anything. I should have, but show you the graph instead of just describing it. But it's a big spike. His end zone contact rate was around 74, 75% on the year, but he had stretches, like sustained stretches, where it was like 75 to 80%, which is, again, combine that with the much better strikeout rate, like that's pretty solid given his profile. But again, it tanked with the injury, had some spikes after the injury, but that they weren't as good or sustained pre-injury. And then same ideas for the weighted on base average. His expected weighted on base average for the year was actually 320, which is basically league average. And his rolling average for much of the year was around 350 or so. So again, not an exact science here, quick research in podcast form, but it's his rolling WOBA tanks hard right after the injury, just plummets, bottoms out. And so it was around 300 for the year, but expected was 320. So I think there's a little bit more. I think there's potential for that bat to actually be viable in the major leagues. And I'm sure there's some people going to look at the overall strikeout rate. They're going to look at his batting average and they're going to say, no, never mind. Nope. But I think there's a little bit of light shining here with Fabian. And I think the injury thing is legit. And, you know, if whatever small tick better he can get against fastballs too will help, because I don't have this number broken down like some of the other numbers, but he had a 41% whiff rate for the year against fastballs. And when he did make contact against fastballs, it wasn't good contact. His weighted on base on contact against fastballs was 300 for the year. Against breaking balls, it was 398 and 440 against off-speed pitches. So maybe a little bit of light there. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird to think where we ended up with Fabian, because if you go back to the first 2.5 months of the season, we were talking about how encouraging it was to see the strikeout numbers where they were. Batting average was not that high, but I think we understand who Judd Fabian is. And in a good season, Judd Fabian's probably going to hit 235 to 240. But he's going to walk a lot, and he's going to hit for power, and he's going to play a great center field. And I don't know that he gets enough credit for how good his defense is. but he is a really good defensive center fielder with a really good arm. And then in the after the wrist injury, he just kind of plummeted. And Nick did a really good job breaking down the numbers there. So we went from a place where in the first half, it seemed like not only was he a lock to be protected in the offseason, but that he could possibly make his major league debut before 2025 ended, to him not being protected from the Rule 5 draft and then not being chosen, and now being maybe Norfolk's starting right fielder next year in an outfield that has one player on the 40-man in Reed Trimble and a former first-round pick in Enrique Bradfield Jr., who by the end of the next season could be on the 40-man or have already made his major league debut. So Fabian, in that respect, seems like the odd man out. But there is, I think, reason to be cautiously optimistic that once Fabian gets further removed from the injury that he had, because wrist injuries really do affect hitters, that when he gets further removed from that wrist injury, that we'll see something closer to first half Judd Fabian. I don't know that Fabian's ever going to hit enough to be an everyday regular center fielder in the major leagues, but I've always thought that the bat is probably good enough for him to be a quality fourth or fifth outfielder. I just hope he gets back to that point early in this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, one other point about why I think you could see a little more of an uptick. His batting average for balls in play for the year was 241, which is pretty darn low for a guy with, he's got some wheels. I mean, he's not super fast like Vance Honeycutt, Enrique Bradfield, but he steals bases. He plays center field. Just really low, especially compared to his career averages. So just a lot of factors that I think I agree. I think ultimately his ceiling is probably just a really good reserve outfielder. Can play all four spots very capably. But I think where we ended the season is like way under that. So I think he can get back on track for that.
And we'll see. I didn't hate the Leody Tavares signing for his role and what he's going to serve there. But if he's just bad and just like unplayable, and if Fabian picks up in the first half where he was in the first half last year, and ideally Enrique Bradfield Jr. is hitting how we think he can hit in AAA this year, I could see a world where, all right, they dump Leody Tavares and then say, all right, Fabian, here's your shot to be the backup guy. Hopefully this whole time Kowser is healthy if he's going to be the full-time center fielder, but I don't think it's crazy to think that we could see Fabian at some point next year early on, and he could have that opportunity to be the bridge guy to hopefully what is Enrique Bradfield Jr. starting in center field in the future. But I don't know. Yeah, you did pull me back in there a little bit. So
mission accomplished.
I'm going to go over to my hitter now. And for this, I was kind of torn between a few different players, but I ended up settling on Luis Almeida, who last year began the season in the FCL after starting out there in 2024 and never really being able to get on track because it was a second straight season where he dealt with injuries. And basically for the first 2 years of Almeida's career, 2023 in the DSL, 2024 in the FCL, it was one injury after another. And it felt like it always carried over into the offseason. He would get off to slow starts, he would get hurt, and then we'd see this cycle where he would start to pick up the pace a little bit at the end of the year. He goes to the FCL to start out last season, and his numbers didn't pop off the page necessarily, but good walk to strikeout numbers, 103 WRC plus, goes to 246 average, 352 on base, 377 slugging. So he gets promoted to Delmarva, and for the most part, over 2 months or so with the Shorebirds, really struggled at the plate. And his final line with Delmarva is a 238 batting average, 314 on base percentage, and a 348 slugging to go with a 99 WRC plus. But Nick over at our Substack dug a little bit deeper into the data, and there's a few things that I was particularly encouraged by. He had a 76.5% contact rate with the Shorebirds, an 11.1% swinging strike rate. And as Nick pointed out in that piece, if he had qualified in terms of plate appearances, Almeida would have ranked in the top 25 in the Carolina League and swinging strike rate with the Shorebirds last year. And once again, he finished the season strong. Over the last month's worth of games, he hit 281s and 125 WRC plus. Now, as I just mentioned a moment ago, we have seen that from Almeida before, where he'll finish strong. You're thinking that that's a reason for optimism going into the following year. He'll carry that momentum over and produce at the plate, and then he doesn't. But this time around, I'm hopeful because we actually saw him get through a full season healthy. So as far as we know, there are not any injuries carrying over into the offseason or any injuries that he's dealing with this offseason that are going to hamper him a little bit. So a full healthy offseason coming off to a strong finish to the regular season could really do a lot of good for Almeida. And I don't know that we're going to see the results in terms of power right away for him. But if I look at Almeida's numbers at the end of April, the strikeout rate is down from where it was last year. Let's say it's 20% or lower. He's got a walk rate in the 8 to 10% range with about a 100 WRC plus. I'll feel like that we're in a good place with him. I just want to see him make contact more consistently, start to tap into that poolside power that we've thought that he's had, but we haven't quite seen yet in game. And it's just, for me, going to come down to health. Can he stay healthy over a full season, allow him to build off that momentum that he had at the end of last year? And if he does that, I think this is a really good bounce back candidate.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you look, he's 19. He was 19 last April, so he'll be 20 early on in the season. But if you think about it, and he grew up in New Jersey, I mean, last season would have been like his professional debut if he would have been drafted out of high school, and he put up basically a league average WRC plus over the 200 plate appearances that he got in low A. So I think he held his own. We know he's got the tools. He's flashed power. He's flashed certain things. So yeah, I think he's pretty much, it seems like he's been a disappointment just because he's never really put up sustained numbers at any level. But at the same time, he's kind of held his own. We know he's got the skills and the tools to do it. It's just a matter of putting it together. So I think he's pretty much right on pace to, as long as he develops and makes strides that we want to see this year, I think he's on pace to break out potentially this season.
Seeing something would be nice. He's so frustrating to watch, to be honest. But it's because he was a 2.3, just under $2.3 million shortstop, and like you mentioned, growing up in Jersey, like this was a kid who, when the Orioles signed him, they were like, if he would have stayed in the States, he pretty much would have had his pick of what SEC program he was going to play for. Like that's how highly sought after he was, and we just haven't seen it yet. But again, you guys mentioned the age. He doesn't turn 20 until April. So yeah, he's going to spend all year as a 20-year-old in Delmarva. He could spend all year in Delmarva and still be on par with his peers age-wise. So like not ideal, but not a death blow yet by any means. And it's been, I think he's had 2 shoulder surgeries, one on each shoulder. So he had that very early on in his career. I think he had the ankle injuries as well. Like he had a couple of injuries early on. He still hasn't played a ton of games across 3 years, but last year, he was the league average bat with Delmarva. The thing is, for me, it's also like defense. Just where is he going to play defensively? It's like find a defensive home, stay healthy, keep improving at the plate, and maybe he stays viable. But I honestly have no idea like where he would even profile best in defensively. I haven't really taken the time to watch enough. I will say, and this isn't to characterize his entire defensive profile, but I know there have been a couple of times where I'm like, I'm going to watch the defense here. He's playing like third base. I'm going to pay attention. And he even at first base, he's like botched some like routine plays and just like, what are you doing, man? And there's just like no emotion on the face. And it's just like, he's not into it. And I don't know, maybe that's just personality. People think I'm angry or annoyed all the time. It's just strong RBF. I get it. Maybe that's just him as well. But I don't know where he plays defensively. That's my biggest question there. I do think maybe the shoulder stuff, being a young kid, the power is still in there. It could still come. But where is he going to play? Where does he fit best defensively on the field? I think is a big question he needs to answer this year as well.
Yeah, Nick, I think that's a fair point. I actually just did a top 50 countdown for someone that was teammates of Almeida's for most of last season. I'm not going to spoil it yet because it hasn't dropped, but I made a fairly declarative statement in that player's episode of like, all right, he's a third baseman. I've seen enough of him moving around the infield. I've seen enough of him at shortstop to know that it's not going to work there, but I think third base can work. With Almeida, I have no clue. And we were kind of led to believe when he signed that he wasn't a sure thing at shortstop, but for his age, he looked like he could be close to a sure thing. And I just, I haven't seen anything good or bad to convince me otherwise. I haven't seen anything that leads me to believe, oh, you got to move him off. It's not Ryan Mountcastle territory for me yet. When I saw him as a shortstop years ago, and it's like, all right, this is not going to work. But I'm also not looking at him as somebody that I think is automatically going to be a shortstop. So I think the defense is a fair concern.
Yeah, let's just hope it's not going to lead to first base only, because I don't know if the back can carry that. I would hope third base, second base maybe would be the best option, but we'll have to see.
I'll go over to my pitcher now, and this is a guy that we have actually not seen appear in an official game in an Orioles uniform yet, and that's Christian Rodriguez, their 10th round pick out of Cal State Fullerton in the 2024 draft. And this is one of those cases where the Orioles go based off of stuff in the draft and not pure college stats, because if you look at how Rodriguez's final season at Cal State Fullerton, 5.45 ERA and 69 and third innings pitched with 58 strikeouts to 29 walks. On its face, that is not that impressive. However, when you consider that he was back coming off of Tommy John surgery for his first full season, that's something you got to give him. And then he looked excellent in the MLB Draft League, pitching for Frederick, which at the time was an MLB Draft League team. He appeared in 8 games, posting a 3.92 ERA with 45 strikeouts to 12 walks across 39 innings. And the game where Rodriguez shined was a perfect game he threw, or excuse me, a no-hitter he threw in the draft league. 9 innings pitched, 16 strikeouts, 2 runs allowed. It was the first complete game in league history and the most strikeouts in the game in league history. So he looked excellent in that game, and some StatCast data that Nick pulled at the time of that showed that he was hitting 93.3 average velocity on the fastball after throwing about 92 miles per hour at Cal State Fullerton that year. If we also look at the pitch data that we had from Cal State, he had a 4-seam fastball, sinker, slider, curveball, splitter, changeup. Now, this was only over part of a season. We didn't have StatCast data for every inning that Rodriguez threw at Cal State, but for roughly half of those, that's what we got. So very intriguing pitch data coming into last year. Unfortunately, he missed all of 2025 with an unspecified injury. He was working out in Sarasota at various points, though. So we're hoping that we see Rodriguez on the mound this year, because this looks like an interesting pitch mix. Fastball that was showing more signs of life in the weeks leading up to the draft in 2024, and somebody who I'm kind of hoping can have a Carson Dorsey type season where you get him on the mound, and even if there's some rust early on, by the time you get into the second half, you're starting to see a lot more life on the fastball. You're starting to see him command his pitches better, and maybe he's able to pitch at multiple levels next year.
I also go back to, he was a 10th round pick that they gave an overslot deal to, if I remember correctly. So he's 6'6". They gave him an overslot deal. He was going to be further removed from Tommy John. You mentioned the velo increase already. He was also set to transfer to Hawaii and chose the Orioles. Personally, I would have chosen a year in Hawaii over a year in Salisbury, Maryland, but that's just me. I also didn't have almost $200,000 thrown at me. But yeah, I think the stuff was on the rise there before. And yeah, the big issue is we don't know what the injury was. I was told it was not another Tommy John surgery. I don't know if that's better. I don't know if that's worse. Was it shoulder? Was it something else? I don't know. I don't think any beat writer is going to ask questions about a 10th round draft pick. So who knows? Hopefully we see him on the mound this spring. But yeah, this is a 6'6" pitcher with who got an overslot deal is nothing to sneeze at. So I think he was definitely going to be an interesting guy to take a look at.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. I think you guys nailed it, but I'm excited to see him pitch, hopefully, in 2026, along with a bunch of other guys that we've yet to see yet. So that's always an exciting part of a new season, is getting to see some of these guys that didn't get a chance, whether it's a couple drafts ago because of injury or most recently just because they shut him down before the end of the season. But definitely looking forward to seeing what he's got.
Yeah, just to clarify one point I made, that was not a no-hitter that Rodriguez threw in the draft league, but still complete game, very good numbers. And just to go over the pitch mix one more time here, according to StatCast data, four-seam fastball, sinker, slider, curveball, splitter, and a changeup. We just talked about Zach Fruit a few minutes ago and how the Orioles had worked to broaden his pitch mix. So you can see with Rodriguez where there are some traits that he already has coming into pro ball that they like and they feel like they can really develop. We'll go over now to a different discussion completely, which is the Major League bullpen. And the Orioles made a significant move early in the offseason by signing Ryan Helsley to take over as their closer. And with Felix Bautista's injury in the second half last year, the closer's role was a huge hole coming into this offseason. They have filled that. Otherwise, though, we have not heard a lot but outside of that and the reacquisition of Andrew Kittredge in an early offseason trade with the Cubs. So far, the Orioles kind of staying the course with their bullpen. Now, of course, it's worth pointing out that although it is January 28th, the free agent market still is not moving that fast. The pitching market in particular is moving kind of slow, and that's something that's been talked about a lot as it relates to the rotation. But we haven't really seen a ton of moves concerning the bullpen outside of your top-tier closers signing early in the offseason. So there is still some opportunity for the Orioles to improve this bullpen between now and the start of spring training, and certainly between now and the start of the regular season. And Bob, I'll start with you here. As I just mentioned a moment ago, the Orioles solved the biggest question mark around this bullpen by bringing in Ryan Helsley. But where do you think the bullpen as a whole stands right now?
I actually don't think it's in that bad of shape, even if they leave it as is right now. I think it's underrated or forgotten about that we got Andrew Kittredge back in a sneaky trade right after the season ended. And I also think Orioles fans might not know how great he pitched with the Cubs after that trade. And I think he was closing games for them at one point, put up some really great numbers. So he's back for some late innings. So you got obviously Ryan Helsley, who, as long as he's not the Mets version of Ryan Helsley, should be a proven closer kind of guy. Other than that, I mean, you have Keegan Aiken and Ynier Cano, clearly question marks, but if they are at their best, they're pretty decent relievers. And then you got Tyler Wells coming back. I doubt he's an option to start games right now. So he pitched well out of the bullpen in his rookie year, in his Rule 5 draft year. And then you have guys like Dietrich Enns and Rico Garcia, who were waiver claims or small trades in the second half of last year. I think their stuff is great. I think they can be really strong parts of a major league bullpen. You also have Cade Stroud, who flashed some pretty good stuff in his brief time with the Orioles in the second half last year. You have Colin Selby, who he's always been tantalizing with the stuff. He's got to stay healthy and show it. He's out of options. We got guys like Cam Foster, Chase McDermott, who we talked about earlier. Grant Wolfram showed some life last year after a trade with the Brewers. You also have Anthony Nunez, other guys in that AAA, Albert Suarez potentially. So ideally, I think you would like to bring on maybe another lefty. Maybe you could bring home Danny Coulombe and replace Keegan Aiken with him. Or ideally, I think you want someone better than Keegan Aiken and maybe force Ynier Cano to start in AAA until he can prove that he's right again. But another lefty wouldn't be bad. But I don't hate that it's a younger, more yet to be proven, but I think there's upside here. And especially in AAA, I think even like the starting pitching prospects can come out and help in the bullpen at some point. So I kind of like that we have on paper, a great offense a pretty solid rotation, and a bullpen that is solid but has some upside and question marks.
Yeah. I think I said last week, I feel like you haven't mentioned Ryan Helsley's name since he signed. And I don't care who closes in 2027. Not concerned about that at all. Figure that out at that point. But for right now, it's, what version of Ryan Helsley do we see? The fastball issues were there before he went to the Mets. So it's not just a matter of he was tipping, fix that, and fix him. But clearly the Orioles think they can get him back to form. Kittredge, just do your thing. You're going to be solid. And I love having Tyler Wells in the pin. And I think it's no question he's going to work out of the pin now, especially if you got, even if the Orioles don't go out and sign Fromber, the fact that they're like seemingly interested in adding Zach Gallen or Justin Verlander, these other, back the rotation type guys that they've been connected to. If they were to bring in, if they're still looking at bringing in those guys, like Tyler Wells is going to the pen. So I think you got three really solid pieces there. And you don't have to worry about Tyler Wells like breaking down halfway through the year if he's pitching out of the rotation. So I like all that. And yeah, like you mentioned, there's a lot of question marks and there's going to be a lot of mixing and matching. But, Cano, we've talked about him already. I don't think anybody's overly confident that he's going to rebound. There's an avenue, but it's a tight avenue for him to kind of fit through. Keegan Aiken, I'm not going to be as like eager to just shoot him into the sun as I think some people are. I think it was a matter of just there are signs for sure, don't get me wrong, but I think you look at his pre-injury and post-injury roles and numbers, and I think you see a big difference and maybe some reason as to why there were some struggles. Like to see the fastball like Stuff Plus go from a 114 to 102, overall Stuff Plus drop from 111 to 103. And the location plus has dropped steadily year over year. It's 106 to 104 to 100 to 97, like all fair. But through the first 3 months of the season, Aiken had a 28% strikeout rate and 8% walk rate, 181 average against, 096 whip. Fastball Stuff Plus was 114, overall Stuff Plus 111. Then he misses a month with shoulder inflammation. And when he returned, the bullpen's traded. He's plugged into the ninth inning role, and the numbers tanked. So I think that's unfair to him. I have 0-inch issue in at least him starting the year back in that seventh inning role and see if he can rebound a little bit. Obviously, the leash shouldn't be too long with him, but still, I think that his path to rebounding is a little bit easier to see than maybe Niño Cano's. I do think there are some guys I think maybe we'll dive into a little bit more about who we think could be a bigger contributor this year. I think there's some quality options there, and I think I'm not the Danny Coulomb bull. I'll pass on Danny Coulomb, but I do think I found another guy that I would not mind the Orioles bringing in. But
I would say that Keegan Aiken's safe space is low leverage situations. If you put any pressure on him, it's going to go poorly. But I do think as a bridge reliever, long reliever, 2-3 innings in fifth to seventh inning, he can be solid. And I do think he could bounce back to that. But since he's out of options now, and I don't know, I feel like we could do better, but I'm sure he will start the season in the Major League bullpen.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Aiken. I'm not eager to move on from him, but I also understand that there are some concerns when you dig a little bit deeper, and he shouldn't have too short of a leash. I will say that I just don't think that he was ever cut out for the closer's role, and he basically got the job by default because you trade a few relievers at the deadline. You trade Sir Anthony Dominguez, Gregory Soto, and Andrew Kittredge, and then Felix Bautista gets hurt right after that, and you're left with a lot of guys that either are struggling in the case of Yenier Cano, or that just don't have a lot of major league time. So it's like, all right, well, let's just put the guy that we know the best and we know most likely what we're going to get out of him in the closer's role. And that just is not where Aiken should have been. And unfortunately, the circumstances just kind of forced him there. Personally, I wish that Cade Stroud and Rico Garcia would have gotten more opportunities in that spot, especially once the Orioles got into September and it was clear that they were not going to make the playoffs. Not that either of those guys would have been the closer going into the season, but let's just see how they look in high leverage situations. But for both of those guys, I thought they were very encouraging. at the end of last year. We've been saying for years with Stroud, the stuff is a lot better than the results. He just needs to be healthy, and he needs to throw strikes more consistently. We're even saying that when he got added to the 40-man before the last season, and what was kind of a surprise move at the time. But you look at the fastball velocity, averaging almost 96 miles per hour, mixing that in with a sweeper, curveball, cutter, and sinker, seemingly having much better command of his arsenal than he has had at any point in his career. And yes, it is a very small sample size that we're working off of, just 26 and a third innings in the major leagues. But I kind of think the Orioles have something here, and I want to see him get some opportunities in high leverage situations, at least early on this year. And then in the case of Rico Garcia, this is a guy that's bounced around a little bit in the course of his career, but the fastball velocity looked really good. I thought that he was pretty effective with the secondaries, especially the slider, over the final months of last season. So there was something there to build off of. And hopefully in those two guys, you have some success from 2025 that's going to be sustainable next year. But I want to go right back to Nick here. Who's your Danny Colome alternative?
So there aren't a ton of options, first of all. But I don't know. Maybe if I'm missing something, let me know. I wouldn't mind bringing in a Jalen Beeks. Just last year with Arizona, 57 innings, a 3.77 ERA, 1.08 WHIP, 202 average against. He's got late inning experience, regularly 45, 46% ground ball rates. Fastballs didn't get a ton of swing and miss. Did get hit around a little bit. I don't know if there's anything to unlock there. That's for someone else to dive into and let me know, like genuinely. But that changeup had a 35% whiff rate and an 0.67 average against, and he threw that pitch 38% of the time. He's also like successful against left-handed hitters. Lefties hit 218 against him. He had 26 strikeouts and 5 walks. For comparison, some other guys, some other lefty options, Grant Wolfram had a 313 average against versus lefties. Granted, it was like they ran like a 500 BABIP. He was better against lefties in the minors, but that was still a 253 average against. And Dietrich Enns had a 353 average against versus lefties. Beeks is pretty solid against lefties in the big leagues for a couple of years now. It should be pretty cheap. Doesn't have options, but if you're looking for another lefty option, I wouldn't mind bringing a guy like that in and letting those guys compete, and may the best man win.
I'll take him over Rickett for sure. The four-seam fastball, it looks like it's around 94, 95 miles per hour, but a 92 stuff plus. Yeah, change up and cutter are his good pitches, and then he can use that fastball as a change of pace or setup pitch. I don't hate it. I don't think he's great, but who is at this point in the offseason other than Framber Valdez, who refuses to sign anywhere? But yeah, I could get into some Jalen Beeks action. I mean, cross paths in Tampa Bay Rays organization for a while. So, yeah, I like that.
My knee-jerk reaction as I dig a little bit deeper into Jalen Beeks is Cino Perez without as good of a fastball, but without the peaks and valleys in his performance, where he goes out and he has a scoreless inning in one appearance and then he gives up 5 runs in a third of an inning in the next. So I would kind of take that. I would take the guy that doesn't, the strikeout rate has dropped a little bit in the last couple of years for Beeks, but at the same time, this is one of those moves that I think if the Orioles do make it, it would fly under the radar at the time. But you're going to be looking in June and July, and in some tight spots, you're going to be watching the Orioles bullpen thinking, thank God they signed Jalen Beeks when they did, because he's able to get them out of some tight spots in the later innings. He's very solid. So I think it's a good pull here.
Yeah. And maybe they add a sweeper to the mix. I don't know. But speaking of Cino Perez, he's got showcases going on with teams interested. His velocity's up to 98. Do we bring him back? Please don't.
Yeah, I mean, whoever you bring in at this point, you're not bringing in like a stud, right? But you're bringing in guys to compete and incremental improvements there. But yeah, I also like to kind of like look at some other guys who I think could be interested. I mean, I'm also getting more and more behind potential like Grant Wolfram. Like, what if he could even win that spot? What if he could step up and even kick Aiken out of that spot. I mean, I don't see why, unless Aiken just completely tanks in spring training, I don't see why he at least doesn't start the year on the major league rotation. But Wolfram, though, I mean, he could be a big breakout and may not happen initially, but I think he starts the year back in AAA because he has options. But I mean, I don't know. Best case, he's a lefty sitting 95 miles per hour, and he had a 3.5% barrel rate last year, which right at league minimum in terms of hard hit rate allowed, 37%. The ERA is 5.4, but expected ERA is 3.58. 50% ground ball rate, and there was hitters posted a near 400 BABIP against them. So like, yeah, he walked a lot of guys. That's got to get better. But Wolfram even talked about in a recent interview he did. He talked about how he struggled with that. He got traded from Milwaukee, then he goes up and down and up and down. Norfolk, Baltimore, Norfolk. That riding that shuttle, he didn't take too kindly to that. I think on like the mental side of it, being able to just find a consistent role. Prime example of why a lot of guys in his spot just go overseas. You don't have to worry about the up and down. You get a guaranteed roster spot. You don't have to deal with crappy minor league ballparks, different baseballs, zero schedule of any kind. They get stability and a chance to work on their stuff. Wolfram didn't get that, but I think from what he said, he learned from that and he's better prepared for that now entering this year. So I'm pretty excited to see what he can do out of the bullpen next year, because he's going to get a shot. It's just a matter of when.
And for how long? Yeah, I like Wolfram a lot, actually. Looking at his stuff plus numbers, his slider 122, stuff plus, changeup 121, his sinker, which is his most used pitch, right at league average. If you look at his estimators, his actual ERA was 5.4, but his xERA was 3.54, FIP 3.59, Sierra 3.99. So, yeah, I see a lot of potential there, and you can see why the Orioles targeted him and look to develop him. If he can get his location plus was 94, so that's what he needs to work on, just getting these pitches a little more. I don't even know if they have to be strikes, but at least deceiving the hitter into swinging more often. Yeah, Wolfram's a good option as well. And I agree with you, what you said earlier, Zach, about Cade Stroud and Rico Garcia getting some looks in high leverage, which I think, ironically, that's something that Brandon Hyde used to do really well, was put guys in. This was even when we were a contending team for a few years, put guys in high leverage spots just to see how they respond, instead of just saying, oh, this guy's been in the league the longest, he's going to be the ninth inning guy in a obviously lost season. I do think that was a missed opportunity on our end, but we'll see what happens. I still like those guys a lot. I think they have good stuff. Rico Garcia, especially. I think we lucked out being able to snag him on waivers from the Mets, because he was pitching well for them, showing great stuff, but they just ran out of room as they were getting healthy. And I think we got a potential guy that could be here for a few years, as long as he continues to pitch the way he did.
Yeah, the thing I like about Wolfram is we're talking about someone who, over the course of his minor league career, has consistently posted good strikeout numbers and ground ball rates to go in the mid-40s. I thought that he was really good at Norfolk last year, and I think that being on the shuttle as much as he was did affect him. So hopefully, if he gets that opportunity in the major leagues early this year, he's able to take advantage of it and stick. And then for one more guy that I will throw out there, in terms of who we could see in the bullpen this season, it's not going to be right away, but I do expect that Anthony Nunez is going to end up playing a pretty big role in the Orioles bullpen this year. That fastball slider combination in particular is really good, but he's got a broader pitch mix in that. This is someone that, since he converted to being a pitcher full time and went back into pro ball with the Mets, has moved through the minor leagues pretty quickly. I thought the Orioles were lucky to get him when they did last year from Mullins at the deadline. And I believe that, yeah, we could be talking, sitting here at the end of April, looking at Anthony Nunez's numbers, saying, when is this guy going to get a shot in the major leagues? Because he's clearly overwhelming AAA hitters.
Yeah, I think he's the best relief prospect the Orioles have had in quite some time. And we've talked about it a little bit, that I think he's actually a guy, since he's so late to switching to pitching and took off so quickly, so well, I think he's a guy that you can pull that latest trend in baseball from reliever to starter at some point down the line. unless he just takes off and becomes like the closer starting next year after Ryan Helsley leaves, after he puts up a dominant 2026 season. But if you're looking at his, again, TJ Stats, shout out to his, he's got a bunch of really fun tools that if you're interested in this stuff, you should check out if you haven't already. But he got some AAA time. Anthony Nunez, obviously at the end of the season, it's 15.2 innings, so it's not a huge sample, but his stuff plus numbers are pretty darn good. 105 cutter, 117 slider, 98 four seam, 97 sinker, right around league average, but good velocity at 96, 95 respectively. And then a 108 changeup. That's 3+ pitches to, or 3+ or better pitches, 2 of them, the slider and changeup, being borderline elite, getting a lot of whiff on every single one of those pitches. And yeah, just, I think, and he has not that much experience, so he's clay to work with. I think he's in the right organization to get the most of his skills out from him. Very, very excited to see what Nunez does. And maybe in spring training, that's the one thing I'm like, can this guy steal an opening day spot? That would be incredible.
I just like the guys with options who are probably going to start in AAA. I like the different options the Orioles have right now. So like I'm going into the year content. I do think it is missing the big league bullpen is missing something. I don't know if they're going to be able to get it before the season starts, but I think to start the year, like, I'm not freaking out when this rotation has to turn things over to the bullpen yet. Now, of course, if Cano and Aiken and some others are just shit in the bed in preseason, then we can freak out. But until then, like those guys that you mentioned, even throwing some like Yarmil Geraldo love, just a 30-year-old who hadn't pitched an affiliated ball in 4 years, goes 65 innings between the big leagues and AAA, some insane strikeout numbers. He's been nearly unhittable this offseason and down in the Dominican Winter League, but that changeup had a 61% whiff rate in the big leagues, and the slider held hitters to 200 average, with the expected numbers looking even better last year. And I think he was probably gassed because he's never thrown 65 innings against that quality competition in his life. So again, another guy with options who could be interesting. It's going to be an Orioles bullpen. As long as Helsley and Kittredge and Tyler Wells are your studs there for right now, I think they're going to be able to mix and match pretty well with the rest of these guys. And then once you get to the deadline, of course, then I think you'll see a bigger splash. But until then, I'm content with it.
I do love Yarmil Geraldo, and somehow I forgot all about him, even though I did see the tweet that you sent out from our account a few days ago and got excited again. I forgot all over. I was a big Geraldo guy last year in the minors and thought he flashed in the majors, but I think he was walking, and clearly going from a 13.5 K per 9 to just over 9 in the majors was a little bit down, but the walks were up. Yeah, I think a full season in this organization following up that expected ERA of 2.60 last year. I'm still on the Geraldo chain.
Yeah, definitely interested in seeing what he has. And with that, that does it for this episode. We will be back next week. In the meantime, you can check out our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member today. It's $3, $5, or $10 levels. You can have access to our ongoing Top 50 Prospects Countdown, which, as we mentioned earlier, is right around the 25 range now. So not only are you going to get the next 25 prospects, but you can go back and access every player up to this point in the countdown. And then as we get into the regular season, have bonus weekly coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself, plus monthly updates to our top 50 list. So be sure to check that out. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, Zach Spedden, you've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.